with us today, we may extend a warm welcome. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Rahayu, Salam Kebajikan. Yes, Mr. Sascha Hardt, LL.B, LL.M, PhD, Honorable Dean of Faculty of Law, Fakultas Jawa Timur, Miss Maeyangsari, KMFH, Honorable Moderator, Lecturer, and Philosophy. Welcome to the last lecture organized by the Faculty Hukum, Universitas Pembangunan Nasional Jawa Timur. Both an honor for me and a privilege to the Master of Ceremony for this academic occasion. My name is Nabla Aurelia Luna Azhar. A highly relevant theme in the AI era. Challenges in physical education. Remind us that of ethical awareness and integrity firmly upheld. Allow me to share the rundown of today's topic. First, opening of the national anthem in the Data Raya and Master by the PM of the Faculty of Law. Fourth, wording and photo session. Fifth, presentation of the lecture. And sixth, closing. We truly hope that this event will enrich our understanding and inspire meaningful reflection on the ethical dimension of technology and legal. Officially, our program plans to gratitude to the Almighty God for His blessings that enable us to gather today in good health and harmony. Before proceeding, let's take a moment for prayer in accordance with our own faith. Prayer may begin. We shall now proceed with the singing of the national anthem, Indonesia Raya, followed by Maastricht. To all audience,
Live report lah. Live reportnya lah kok nggak RFM kan ngetek gitu ya.
Roll the audience, please. Next, we are honored to invite again the book address. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang terhormat Ibu Dekan Fakultas Hukum, yang kami hormati Bapak Eko Wahyudi SHMH, selaku Wakil Dekan 1, yang kami hormati Ibu Adira Dita SHMH, selaku Wakil Dekan 2, yang kami hormati Ibu Dr. Espina Puspitosari SHMH, selaku Wakil Dekan 3, dan yang kami hormati seluruh Bapak Ibu dosen yang telah hadir pada acara ini. Kita sekarang berada pada persimpangan jalan, di mana di satu sisi AI memberikan banyak manfaat bagi kita, tapi di sisi lain AI merupakan ancaman yang besar bagi kegiatan akademik. Salah satu contoh tantangannya adalah bagaimana kita dapat membedakan karya tulis tersebut merupakan karya yang ditulis oleh manusia ataupun karya yang ditulis oleh AI. Mari kita jadikan AI sebagai alat pengembangan diri. Jangan sampai AI hadir sebagai alat untuk mengurangi rasa kejujuran kita. Kita sebagai mahasiswa Fakultas Hukum yang pada nantinya menjadi penegak hukum harus tetap memiliki integritas, karena integritas merupakan fondasi penting bagi keadilan. Integrity is the foundation of justice and should not be sacrificed for the sake of technology confinement. AI should be used as a tool to improve quality, not as a means to lower standard of honesty. Akhir kata, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Akbar Aulia, for your inspiring remarks. Next, we are honored to invite the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Law, Mr. Eko Wahyudi, Magister of Law, to deliver the welcome address.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, and good afternoon, everyone. Honorable our distinguished guest is Sascha from Maastricht University, Fakulty of Law, Jawa Timur. The Honorable Vice Dean of Faculty of Law, the Honorable Study Program Coordinator, and the Honorable Head of Laboratory, and our respected lecturers and students, Faculty of Law. Welcome to the Faculty of Law Pendidikan Jawa Timur guest lecture. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Faculty of Law Pendidikan Jawa Timur, I would like to warmly welcome and all participants to today's guest lecture. We take great pride in hosting this significant academic event. Our deepest appreciation goes to our guest speaker, Mr. Sascha from Maastricht University. Thank you, Mr. For taking the time to join us and for your willingness to share your expertise with our student and academic community. Today's theme, maintaining academic integrity in the AI era, ethical challenges in legal education, is relevant for all of us. As artificial intelligence becomes more integrated into learning and legal practices, we face new questions about honesty, responsibility, and ethical decision making. We hope this session will inspire us to think critically and act wisely in shaping the future of legal education. To everyone here, thank you for your participation and enthusiasm. And finally, I would like to apologize for any shortcoming in the preparation of organization of this event. By saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially declare this guest lecture open. Thank you very much and God bless us. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. LL.B, for inspiring remarks that perfectly capture the essence of today's speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with the award presentation as a token of appreciation to our distinguished speaker. We would like to invite the Vice Dean 1 of the Faculty of Law, Mr. LL.B, Magister of Law, to present certificates of appreciation to both our distinguished speaker, Mr. Hardt, LL.B, LL.M, PhD, and our moderator, Ms. Dessy Maeyangsari, SL, LL.M. We kindly request Dr. Sascha and Ms. Dessy Maeyangsari to come forward. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now proceed to the guest lecture session. To guide us through this session and introduce our distinguished speaker, we are pleased to invite our moderator, Ms. Dessy Maeyangsari. Ms. Dessy Maeyangsari currently serves as a lecturer of the Faculty of Law, KMFH, Jawa Timur. She completed her postgraduate studies at Maastricht University and is actively engaged with the international law. Please welcome with a warm round of applause. Sorry, so we will have a photo session. We kindly invite all speakers, lecturers, and students to come forward for a group photo. May I invite everyone to stand and move a little closer to the front so that we can fit everyone nicely? Ya, silakan semuanya berdiri. Selamat setengah.
Kak modal aku ini kak ngomong itu. Kak ngomong di model ini kak ngomong. Itu harusnya ngomong. Aku sepakat. Iya.
Proceed to the next session. Guidance in the session and introduce our guest speaker. We will proceed to invite a movement and Ms. Dessy and LL.M. Ms. Dessy and LL.M currently serves as a lecturer of the Faculty of Law in Timur, completed her postgraduate studies at Maastricht University and is actively engaged within the Department of International Law. Please welcome with a warm round of applause.
Kan nggak di sini gitu.
Good afternoon, everyone, to our distinguished guests, to the Honorable Dean, Vice Deans, colleagues, and dear students. My name is Dessy Maeyangsari. I will be your moderator today, and my pleasure to welcome all of you to this guest lecture on a highly relevant and timely topic, maintaining academic integrity in the AI era, ethical challenge in legal education. Ladies and Ladies and gentlemen, it is with honor For me to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Sascha Hardt, LL.M. and LL.B. First of all, I would like to uh, introduce you from here. So please go to the stage. This is Dr. Sascha Hardt, from a senior assistant professor of comparative constitutional law at Maastricht University. Round of applause for. Yeah, I will read a brief curriculum vitae from case. So Dr. Sascha is a senior assistant and assistant professor of comparative constitutional law at Maastricht University, Faculty of Law. He's also a fellow of the Montesquieu Institute and a member of Maastricht Center for European Law. And he's a loyal of Maastricht University, I guess, because you get the bachelor degree until the PhD in Maastricht University and maybe professor. Yes. His academic work and professional involvement span comparative constitutional law, parliamentary immunity, populism, and also democracy, also on electoral system, on about constitutional law and the relationship between constitutional and technology, which will be the topic today. Beyond that, he has an extensive experience in legal education development, including collaborations with universities across Indonesia. And also, he is the author and editor of numerous books and scholarly articles, and has spoken at conferences in Europe and also in Asia, including invited expectation at the European Parliament. So yeah, we have very privileged today to have him with us. Coming back to our topics today is about the academic ethical challenge we face during this fast-changing world, particularly in regards with the use of AI in academic settings. Artificial intelligence is reshaping the way we study, write, and engage with legal scholarship. While it offers tremendous opportunities, it also brings significant ethical challenges for the students and also for the lecturers. And today's session will be help us reflect on how we can maintain academic honesty and integrity while we face these rapid technological changes. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sascha Hardt. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind introductions by everybody, Mr. Weinstein, Madam Moderator. Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be back here in this room again. I admire this lecture hall. I wish we had one like this over in Maastricht University. So great to be back here. So today I'm going to speak a little bit about challenges, opportunities, and possibilities for regulation in AI with a special view to education. Let me start with a question. Who of you is using AI? That's what I thought. Does the university here have any internal regulation, any policy on the use of AI? Not at all. So you're free to let ChatGPT write all your assignments?
Yeah. Of course.
Right. And do you still study?
Yes.
That's what I would say.
Of course.
Okay. So well, we're not going to speak exclusively about ChatGPT, right? But let's start, please, with what artificial intelligence is. Artificial intelligence these days is, of course, everywhere. It is
Everybody is speaking about it. Everybody is discussing. Quite a few people fear it because artificial intelligence at least seems to be or purports to be a revolutionary technology, something that will profoundly change the way in which we study, the way in which we work, the way in which we do our jobs. In the negative scenarios, artificial intelligence is going to replace most of our jobs within the next number of years. In some more positive scenarios, it is going to free up much of our time to do meaningful work, while all the administrative, all the boring work is going to be left to the computer. But be that as it may, I think before we start speaking about artificial intelligence seriously, we should gain some consensus on what it actually is. So let's add some definitions. Now, the textbook definition or the lexicon definition of artificial intelligence is this: theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks normally requiring human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, translation between languages. Now, the publicly available systems that most of you will be working with, ChatGPT, Cloud, Gemini, whatever it is that you're using, I see some recognition in your face today, can do all these things, right? Or at least more or less can do all of these things. It can do visual perception, so you can give it a picture and it will tell you what it is. It can do speech recognition. You can talk to it. It talks back to you. Decision making within reason, within limits, but it will get better at it. And translation almost perfect. This is, by the way, good news for researchers, especially for researchers who operate from languages which are not sort of the academic mainstream. I remember 2018, I was teaching a class on abstract writing over at Kuliah University here. And already then we were saying the biggest problem for Indonesian researchers and students, if they want to get published in an international journal, is not the science. Your science is fine, and you have good students, good researchers. The biggest problem is the English. Now that bit can now relatively easily be solved with artificial intelligence. So here we have one of the positive uses. Just to introduce that I'm not here to tell you don't use AI. And I'm also not here to tell you that it's generally a bad thing. Even if that was my opinion, which it is not necessarily, it would be very useful to tell you as much because it is there and we have to live with it, right? So AI is present, it is not going to go away again. So what should we do instead? We should think about how to use it in meaningful ways, how to use it without sort of impeding our human intelligence, because that's the real danger, I think. If people could get less intelligent, the more artificial intelligence they use, not only students, but also us, also colleagues, yes. And we should think about meaningful ways of regulating it. So, theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks requiring human intelligence normally, okay? But if you look at what different jurisdictions, different legal frameworks use as definitions, you see some subtle differences. So in the EU model, which comes from the OECD, artificial intelligence, for their regulatory purposes, is defined as a machine-based system that, for implicit or explicit objectives, infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs such as predictions, contents, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. So here it is about translating input into output in response to prompts or tasks. Okay. Singapore uses a slightly different one. For the Singaporean legislator, Artificial intelligence is a set of capabilities through which computer system can demonstrate human-like behavior and complete tasks which typically require human intelligence. So here you have a less emphasis on what it is used for, and rather more emphasis on what it behaves like. So artificial intelligence is when computer systems can behave like humans, in principle. Australia, an engineered system that generates predictive outcomes, such as contents, forecasts, recommendations, or decisions for a given set of human-defined objectives or parameters without explicit programming. That's important. Without explicit programming, and I put this in quotation marks because it doesn't really think. It uses statistical models to essentially calculate the most likely outcomes. This, by the way, is one of the things you need to be warned about. Artificial intelligence has the capacity to solve a lot of tasks, but it will typically solve them in a relatively boring way. Why? Because it streamlines according to statistical likelihood. So it can write essays for you as students. It can write them in correct English or correct Indonesian, but they will generally be boring. Why? Because it generates the most correct and most statistically likely outcome. But the most statistically likely is never the interesting, right? The most statistically likely is what the masses would produce on average. So just in these definitions, we can already see there is some agreement on what artificial intelligence is, but also there's some nuance. So artificial intelligence is machines behaving like humans or doing things that normally humans do. It is prompt-based without programming. So a calculator, for example, is not an artificial intelligence because it uses built-in programming to perform the tasks. To an artificial intelligence, you can say pretty much anything and it will generate a result for better knowledge. Now, of course, and here it becomes interesting for education, we have to distinguish generative versus non-generative artificial intelligence. It's interesting to hear that for you guys, you have absolutely no regulation when it comes to using AI in your education. In my university, University, we have been struggling for multiple years now with how to regulate it in meaningful ways. All the assignments that are being submitted in my university are routinely put through an AI checking device. So the software will automatically check for use of artificial intelligence. It will give us a percentage. How likely is it, or how much of the assignment has been written with the help of AI? And if that's a significant number, the student gets essentially prosecuted for fraud. But this is problematic because what evidence is there? You know, just because the software thinks this is 90% AI, now is it really? Is that evidence? Is that so clear? We haven't been sitting watching over the person's shoulder while they wrote their assignment. It's just statistics. How fast did they write it? How correct is the English? How logical is the build-up? How boring is it? That's essentially it. So we find this difficult. No surprise there. But we also find it important that students are still able to think for themselves. So we keep the struggle. And we do multiple things. We check for AI. We also reconstruct the tasks that we hand out in such a way that AI isn't particularly good at it. I think you do the same here, probably, or at least you will in the future. You will have to. Yeah. And what we will probably do is I think actually we already have this policy that only a maximum of 30% of examinable assignments or examination relevant assignments can be in a non-controlled environment. So 70% of the grade must be from a controlled environment where there is no use of artificial intelligence. So, but back to the story. Generative, you know what the difference between generative and non-generative? Because what's important is AI is not new. It's not new at all. The only thing that makes it sort of seem new is that since 2023, the LL.Ms, the large language models, have been around, which allows everybody and anybody to operate with AI. Before that, there was already artificial intelligence in statistical engineering, in voice recognition, in cars, in all kinds of machinery, but you didn't have the likes of ChatGPT and Gemini and so on, Copilot. So non-generative AI was always there, for the past decades already. Classifying data, pattern recognition, statistical analysis, reverse image search has been around for a while. But the creating content, so you tell chat, okay, I have rice, soy sauce, sugar, beans, and cauliflower in my fridge. What can I make from this? Can you give me a recipe? And how long will it take to make it? And what else do I need to buy to make it tasty? That's a creative task, and it will do this without any problem. The low cost and free availability of large language model is a game. So it's not really the appearance of AI, but it's the appearance of generative AI at low cost and at general availability that really changes profoundly the way we operate, not least in education, but also in all other sectors. So let's talk about the potential good side, the potential benefits. Already, artificial intelligence models can deliver, if used well, improvements to processes. I give you an example. When I teach my class of constitutional law at home and I'm the coordinator of the class has about 700 students. There are two moments of examination. One is an essay in the midterm and one is an exam in the end. I must calculate a final grade for everybody, but the problem is not everybody participated in the midterm and not everybody participated in the final exam. So I need to operate with three different lists. All students, those who participated in the midterm, those who participated in the final exam. And then I need to generate from those a fourth list with the final grade. And of course, Excel was always able to do it with a number of operations that I'm not very good at, because I do this exactly once a year, and then I forget it again, and next year I have to learn it again. That's very inefficient. But I can describe what I want to do just in language without knowing any formulas, without knowing anything about mathematics whatsoever, or anything about Excel. I can tell 5.1, this is what I need to do. We need to generate the final grade. We need to match the three lists with each other, and we need to check these for any absences. It will do that within seconds, without me learning anything that I shouldn't learn, because my job is constitutional law and not Excel programming. So it can improve processes. It can make results more reliable, because in past years when I did learn it, the Excel processes every year again, the first 3 times I tried it, I would make some mistake and I had to start all over. So many areas of the economy, also potentially government, will probably increase. Think of automation. Think of resource waste. Think of product development. Already now, so I give you the recipe example. What kind of food can I make from it? This can help us save waste. but also more sensitive areas, surveillance, for example, recognition of faces and surveillance cameras. This is something that lawyers should be very hesitant to print. New technological products like self-driving cars or the smart home, self-driving lawnmowers, self-replenishing fridges, whatever. There are big risks involved with these things, and you see that the things that are potentially beneficial are partly the same things that are potentially risky. Yeah, the biggest risk, and this is actually more a existing damage nowadays, is the violation of intellectual property. Because especially large language models, how have they been trained? They have been trained on essentially all the text that there is, all the text that humans have produced. The text that humans have produced is under intellectual property. So large language models have probably, very likely, in their training, violated intellectual property rights at a very large scale. There are currently several trials going on, especially in the US, against the providers of artificial intelligence by authors of text who have discovered that their text have been used in training AI models. This is serious because in a very short while, artificial intelligence will probably be able to produce text that is indistinguishable from human text. And it might put a lot of creative writers, for example, out of work. But their previous work, has been used to train the artificial intelligence without giving any compensation. So that is a damage rather than a risk. But it goes further. Think of who has liability for decisions taken by artificial intelligence damage caused. Let's assume you are sitting in a self-driving car, and the self-driving car causes an accident. Who's responsible? The producer of the car, the driver who no longer drives themselves, the programmer of the AI algorithm, the AI itself. What would that help? Can it be punished? Not really. So non-human agents as decision makers is problematic. Why? Because it doesn't fit our legal regulatory frameworks. We don't have a way yet to deal with AI taking decisions. Privacy is general targeted abuse. Think of political leaders spreading messages that are personalized on social media to, create riots or quell riots. Facilitation of violations of rights. So artificial intelligence can be used to violate the rights of others. Think of deepfakes and so on. So there's plenty of risks, but there is also plenty of benefits. What does that tell us? It means we must regulate, we must be smart about it, but we cannot make it go away. And it's probably not desirable to even try and make it go away. Essentially, a schematic way of showing the benefits of this. Content development is so much easier. Last month, I gave a lecture on the new German election system. The new German election system, well, the old one also, is probably the most complex election system in the world. If you understand the German election system, you understand any election system. I didn't have any slides. I had only one day to prepare. So I asked an artificial intelligence to help me prepare the slides. I created the content because I know the German election system and I understand it, but I didn't have to go through the trouble of making the slides. Okay, make a deck of 8 slides. On slide number 1, you say this. On slide number 2, you say this. On slide number 3, you say this. I still needed to correct for some errors and so on, and it still requires my human intelligence and the intelligence of somebody who knows about constitutional law to make sure that the information is correct. And that is what students like when they use it to make their assignments. But it saved a hell of a lot of time. So content development, assessment, personalized content, really all the tasks, and all the sort of the additional work. When you have to write a lecture, you have to make a deck of slides, but you shouldn't necessarily put your energy into creating a nice background or so. But the risks are weigh at least equally heavy. Next. So let's look at some regulatory approaches. In Indonesia, there isn't that much of a regulatory approach just yet, but there are plans. So, from what I read and hear from ministries in Indonesia, they are very much aware of ongoing developments in artificial intelligence, and they are aware of the importance of the technology, and they agree that the benefits of AI are too great to ignore or even ban. So the idea of banning artificial intelligence is a little surprise in a technology-prone country like Indonesia. There is no real desire to quell this or ban this. But there are legal problems also in this country that are unsolved, and the problems are mounting. For example, there are already intellectual property lawsuits also here, and there is essentially a huge legal gap. What we need to do is, on the one hand, mitigate risk, so limit fraud, limit the potential for abuse, limit criminal use, limit enhance data security, limit the labor market impact. Because what is a country like Indonesia going to do if, for example, I don't know, all the Grab drivers will soon be replaced by self-driving motorcycles? That's a huge problem for the labor market. Or if all the people who do content creation, that's an enormous amount of people potentially being out of work in relatively little time and without proper retraining, without the time for retraining. So regulation is necessary. And we know that in Indonesia this has been recognized, but the implementation or the development of actual plans is relatively slow. General legislation is in preparation. That's all I could find from the Indonesian government. We do not know any details. If you know any details, let me know. I'd be interested. Next. In most leading jurisdictions in the world, the situation is actually very similar, including jurisdictions including the US, Australia. Also, they do not have any binding / comprehensive AI legislation in place yet. What you sometimes see is instruments, things that companies can sign up for. What you sometimes see is instruments that regulate specific parts such as privacy, but no comprehensive AI framework. Some jurisdictions take different routes. They try to make existing legislation cover artificial intelligence as well. That's what the UK does, Japan, for example, also. In Indonesia, so far, we have this circular letter number 9 of 23 on ethical guidelines, but it's only a ministerial circular, right? It's not a piece of legislation at all. Under the circular letter, companies are obliged to have internal AI regulations and standards. Okay, but there's no real indication of what these need to contain. And the letter provides standards for the use of AI in industry. So it should be humane, it should be safe, it should be accessible, transparent, accountable, provide for data protection, etc. But how? It doesn't say how. So the use of it is fairly limited, because the how is the actual question. Because we know pretty much what we want. We don't need legislation or ministerial letters to tell us this. But how to achieve this is the actual difficulty. The other thing that I found, ethical guidelines on responsible and trustworthy AI in fintech, which again, no surprise, promotes AI in these fields, but also doesn't really provide any regulatory content more than that. In the EU, it's different. Next one, please. Sorry, my voice is- In the European Union is actually the most advanced jurisdiction in the world when it comes to regulatory approaches to artificial intelligence. This is why it is very useful to compare. Not because what the EU does is necessarily perfect or even good, but also to look at the mistakes they are potentially making could be very useful. I think what they do is partly successful. So first of all, there is now Regulation 2024-1689, which is essentially an attempt to lay down harmonized rules on artificial intelligence. We call it the AI Act. In all the jurisdictions in the world, this is the first general regulatory framework for artificial intelligence. And interestingly, it lays down very concrete rules and requirements for different uses of AI. And it even incentivizes the use of AI where it is beneficial. And it does all this taking a risk-based approach. Next slide, please. So the first thing is that it basically provides regulation in layers. The risk-based approach means the AI Act in the European Union addresses risks specifically created by AI application. And depending on how risky a use of AI is, it will be more or less regulated. So AI activities that pose legally unacceptable risks, such as, for example, face recognition in public areas by private entities who don't have a legal mandate for that, prohibited, because this is an unacceptable risk. ChatGPT helping you to create cooking recipes or write an essay, very little regulation because the risk is extremely low. And it has several categories in between, right? So what it does is, first of all, provide a list of high-risk applications, set clear requirements for AI systems for those high-risk applications like military, surveillance, etc. Define some specific obligations that the providers and the users, the deployers of high-risk AI must comply with, and require a conformity assessment before any AI system is put into the market. Also, the AI Act forces both the EU itself and all its member states to have regulatory authorities, like a governance structure, in place at both the EU level and national level. Next, please. So what you see there of prohibited, unacceptable risk activities, they are banned, but this is only a tiny fraction. So when it comes to banning, the AI Act is actually not very intrusive. It just doesn't allow the things which pose the greatest risk. When it comes to high risk, there are a set number of obligations that both the producers, so that the companies that make the artificial intelligence programs, and the users of it, interestingly, must comply with. When it's limited risk, there are only specific transparency regulations. For example, the providers must make sure that no intellectual property is being breached when training the system. And then there are minimal risk applications where actually the use is encouraged and not much regulatory pressure is put on both the producers and the providers. Now, how solid is this? How set in stone is it? And how bureaucratic is it? It's still quite bureaucratic. That goes with EU territory. It's normal. But the risk-based approach seems to be the thing that works best because it is adaptable, right? We don't know what new uses will be created in the future and where they will be sorted here. So what is high risk? Again, in the pyramid you saw highest risk, that's prohibited, but one category down is high risk, right? What is high risk? High risk is things like critical infrastructure, transport, but also interestingly, education and vocational training. So high risk would also be if I use artificial intelligence to grade your exams. Typically, I'm not allowed to do that in the European Union. Neither are you allowed to write your essays with artificial intelligence, nor am I allowed to use artificial intelligence to grade your essays. Why? Also, personnel selection. Let's say you have a company and you want to hire somebody, and you put out a vacancy, and you invite, I don't know, there are like 100 applicants, and everybody puts in their CV. You're not allowed, without very specific, within very specific limits in the European Union under the AI Act, to have artificial intelligence make a pre-selection from CVs, for example. Let's say you have 100 applicants for a job, and you want to invite 5 of them or 10 of them for an interview. You're not allowed to ask artificial intelligence to make a pre-selection for you, because this can very easily lead to all kinds of situations of discrimination, biases, gender-based, ethnic-based, based on the name, on the age, whatever. Of course, this is not ruled out when a person does it, but when a person does it, they can be held responsible. When an AI does it, they cannot. Safety of components of products, employment management workers, essential private and public services like credit scoring, and so on. Law enforcement, think of whether somebody is released on bail or not. Migration, asylum, and border control management, administration of justice, democratic processes, all of these things are high risk. Now, what are the obligations that high risk operators have to face? Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. What do they have to do? The producers and the operators, they have to first provide by themselves and at their own cost adequate risk assessment and a plan for mitigation of the risk. They need to prove the high quality of the data sets used to train the AI, for example, to prevent discriminatory outcomes. They must log the activity to ensure accountability and traceability of results. They must have detailed documentation, clear and adequate information provided from the producer to the user, and there must be appropriate human oversight. Now, how realistic is all this? What is appropriate human oversight? This is hardly even possible, but it is the law right here. At least the EU framework is trying to give the regulation some structure. Now let's go to education again specifically. I think what we've learned so far is, first of all, the principle that, or the idea that artificial intelligence isn't going anywhere. We cannot go back 5 years, 10 years. So therefore, we must learn to live with it and regulate in as efficient a way as possible. Therefore, regulation should always be linked with adequate training. So all of you said you are using artificial intelligence when writing your essays and things. Do you think you're good at it? Not really. Why not? So what do you think? What do you think you're missing? Because I also think many people who use this, for example, to write essays or to perform little academic tasks in law, make a case, often the results are incredibly bad. worse than they should be, honestly. And that's because, okay, people are given this very powerful tool. And if you have the paid version of ChatGPT, for example, this is an even more powerful tool. But even the free versions are quite capable. But you need to have certain skills to even operate them properly, right? You need to know how to prompt. You need to know how prompt writing works and how the different models use different kinds of prompts effectively. So any regulation should always be linked with training, with awareness, with capacity building, both on the staff side and in education, also on the student side. So actually using artificial intelligence is something that we should integrate into our teaching process rather than try and ban it. That does not mean we should allow it for examinable content. I'm quite in favor of having people write exams in a controlled environment where AI doesn't help them, because I still need to be able to grade students, and I can't grade students if I don't know if the work is actually theirs. But, for example, a colleague of mine has made a task where he has a very complex court case, and he has written a case brief with the help of ChatGPT, which is disclosed to students. Very complex case, and the analysis of the case contains 3 mistakes. And then the homework for the students is to identify and describe and correct the mistakes. Something that AI still has a very hard time doing, especially if it relates not to publicly available information from the internet, but to a case that you have invented yourself, because then the AI doesn't know the specifics of the case. So we have to go with the times when it comes to creating tasks also, but also we have to learn how to use things properly. Such as I had to learn how to use this to write how to make good slides. We need to differentiate also between AI in educational practice, such as using it in actual teaching and learning, and AI in administration, like scoring, evaluation, selection. The latter, so the scoring, or also student selection, also administration in general, is high risk. And therefore, in the EU, we can only do this within very strict limits. And that's good, because we don't want to be looking into a future where we discriminate. If we know exchange students from country X have in the past failed for 60%, and then we are presented with the question whether we should accept exchange students from that country, and the AI will say no, because statistically the likelihood that they fail is too great. Well, that will create a huge bias and deny opportunity to literally millions of people. So we should not be doing this. What approaches can we use in practice? I think we can make a division into permissive approaches where students can freely utilize AI tools to assist in their assignments, generate ideas, proofreading, optimizing content without any restrictions. Moderate, where you can use AI for specific parts of your assignments when we allow it, but not for the writing, because especially as lawyers, able to write properly, in correct sentences, and so on. And restrictive uses, where AI tools are prohibited for an assignment and all works must be the student's critical original creation. Now, to be fair, mostly in many Western universities, at least, we have used a restrictive approach so far. I think in the future this is untenable, because the evidence problem is too great, and also because you get a greater and greater mismatch between the life and work reality of graduates and what you do at universities. Because this is similar to, back in the 80s, or back in the maybe in the 90s, when everybody started having a computer at home and be able to type, and you would still require exams to be handwritten. That's nice, but you saw becoming worse and worse because nobody was writing anything by hand anymore. I've been there, you know. So I think the moderate approaches is what is increasingly going to be used, what is already being used somewhere. Now, what I hear is the situation for you here is the permissive approach. But the permissive approach is also not ideal. Even if as students you think it makes your life easier, it won't necessarily make your life easier down the line. Because A, you recognize yourself, you're not particularly good at it, maybe because you haven't been schooled on how to use it really well. And also, you might just end up lacking essential skills that you need for a professional job. So I think the moderate approach, which combines schooling on how to use AI properly with a meaningful use of the tool, with also some limits in order to facilitate assessment, I think that is the future we should be aiming for. The approach chosen, if we were to establish a set of principles, would always be task dependent. So it's okay to have a permissive approach for general and essentially just busy work tasks, but to have a moderate approach for creative tasks or even a restrictive approach for examination. The approach should also be chosen with a view to later professional life. This is why it makes no sense to ban it, because in your professional life you will use it because time is not going backwards. Also, we must think hard as universities about quality management. These tools, their uses, they permeate everything. They permeate academic life as much as they permeate industry life and economic life everywhere. So we must think about realistic expectations. There are simply some things that we will not be able to expect from students in the future anymore because it would be anachronistic. It would be out of this time. On the other hand, there are things that we need to start teaching students, or we haven't started teaching before. For example, how to use these things ethically, how to use these things effectively. And in order to be able to teach students this, we need to learn it ourselves. And that sometimes is the greater problem. So universities should invest not only in having a regulatory framework, some regulatory framework, they should do that wisely. And they should also invest very heavily in schooling of staff. So we finalize good practices. Schooling for students and lecturers as to what is permitted and what is not. Because having a regulatory framework without anybody knowing what it contains is not useful. Also, having a vague framework is not useful. Everybody should be aware at any given moment what exactly is expected of them, what exactly they may do and may not do. The tasks that we give as students should be adjusted to potential AI use. So essays that contain value judgments, for example, are harder for ChatGPT to write well than essays which are just reproductive. Reproductive essays don't make a sense anymore. I don't give them to students anymore because ChatGPT does this better than any human would do. Very boring, but also very well. With value judgments, not quite yet. Maximum percentage of examination content that is in a non-controlled environment, because we still need to grade you on something. There should be review cycles because AI develops further in the future, and therefore the policy should also develop. Every couple of years, we must check whether the regulatory framework are still up to date. By the way, the EU AI Act has this. It has a review cycle. And there should be electronic monitoring and flagging systems, because one of the beneficial uses of artificial intelligence is it can also discover with quite some reliability students' uses of AI. These electronic monitoring systems are quite useful. This picture obviously has been created with AI. So you prompt ChatGPT to give me a rendering of Indonesia, artificial intelligence, and the regulatory framework, and it gives you a list. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope I was able to share some insights and facilitate some discussion. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hardt, for the insightful and thought-provoking presentation. Now we learn while there are convenience benefits, there are also the risk of the use of AI. Like AI is really common experience. Like, does any of you call your chat GPT darling or sweetheart or sayang? You don't. Yeah, but there are risks for this. And in Indonesia, we still like in the regulations. And as for now, there are still no regulation regards to this topic. And we also learned that how the European Union trying to manage it. It's always interesting because usually EU regulation is used for our regulation also. And yeah, so we both struggling, both us and also the students, to regulate and check the use of AI in academic setting, and for students, how to use, not to abuse the AI itself. Okay, so we will now open the Q&A questions to participants, students, or after our college. Please feel free to raise your hand and deliver your question. Yeah. Wow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't like that. Yeah.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Mr. Hart, for the incredible lecture. My name is Jeremy, and my question is, what is your opinion about lecture, professor, or experts that are openly or publicly say they are using AI? Wouldn't that make people question their expertise? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Well, I just said I've been using AI to make this slide that I just showed you. So the answer is it always very much depends on what they use it for and how they use it. So if I were, or if any colleague of mine were to have the content of their academic publishing or the content of their lectures, the content of their articles written by artificial intelligence, then of course that is a serious impediment of their expertise, because then it's not them working, right? It's somebody else working for them. And that goes for lecture content, that goes for any output, but if, for example, I'm an Indonesian researcher and I want to publish in an international journal and I write good science, I use artificial intelligence to translate my abstract into quality English to have it accepted in an international journal. I think that's quite exceptional because the content is still mine. All it's adding is essentially a proofread, which I could earlier also have done by paying somebody for it. You know, I could have paid an English proofreader. I did the same. You know, I worked in the Netherlands, but it's originally German. I speak Dutch and I can write correct Dutch, but when I write Dutch, it's very boring. Because I learned the rules, but I don't know the. Well, maybe I know and understand, but I'm not a native writer in that language. So when I write an article in Dutch, I will usually write it, and then I just have a brainstorm for how the language could be improved. I think there is little objection against that. As long as I disclose it, I'm transparent about it. So don't lie about the use of AI, and that's what I also would encourage colleagues to always do. When you use AI to polish your abstract or to translate into a foreign language, or also to find information. So everybody uses Google Scholar. Google Scholar is also an artificial intelligence. When you use something like, I don't know, within ChatGPT, there are these specialized LL.Ms for researchers that can help you locate relevant literature. The only difference is these tools do it on prompt, whereas in Google you have to essentially type and use Boolean operators to find things. So it's not really different from what was there before. If you know how to operate it, it's incredibly efficient, it finds good literature. If you are transparent about it, I don't see a very big problem with this. It will be the expertise when people use it for the work that is supposed to be theirs, the intellectual work. If somebody replaces their own intellectual work by this, then we have a problem. If people use it to streamline administrative processes, like my Excel sheets, I don't think I have a problem. I think actually the university has gained because I'm too expensive to learn Excel every year again for a week or so. That's not efficient, right? And also I can be doing more valuable things with my time than that. So I think the approaches must be nuanced. Yeah.
So for the next question, we have
So thank you for the opportunity. Dr. Hardt, my name is Ryan. I would like to ask, considering Indonesia's current AI regulatory landscape that you have explained earlier, in your opinion, what kind of regulatory approach would be the most appropriate for the Indonesia educational system? Should Indonesia follow a risk-based model like EU AI Act, or develop a hybrid framework tailored for local educational channels, or something else? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. I think the main thing is that Indonesia develops a regulatory framework with actual regulatory content. Because what I have seen so far, and it may be that this is not fully up to date, right? Because I don't check every month for Indonesia's regulatory updates. It can be that they're already developing it, but there's no real legislation yet, so much I know. And what is there in these circulatory letters? It's just principles. It needs to be ethical. Okay, it needs to be safe. It needs to be inclusive. It needs to be transparent. But nowhere does it say how. What is ethical? How do you produce ethical usage of AI? How do you safeguard safety and data security? How do you produce transparency? In the European AI Act also builds on other things that we had before. For example, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which already creates one of the harshest data protection regimes in the world. And I can tell you that many people are very annoyed by it in the public sector and the private sector everywhere. When we make a contract with an Indonesian university partner, they have to fill in all kinds of contracts about data storage, data usage. For example, you can't share sensitive data on WhatsApp, which to Indonesian colleagues is sometimes incomprehensible. Because WhatsApp has an American-based servers, which are outside the scope of the GDPR and so on. So the European framework is quite comprehensive. I don't think you need to go there, and actually, frankly, I think Indonesia at present cannot go there because many of these precursor legislations aren't there yet. But what it should do is make the regulation concrete, because I don't think any sector, including the education sector, is really helped by putting out more principles, saying it should be ethical. Because, for example, right? Because we don't know when some AI use happens and somebody has questions about whether that was ethical or not. What do? You go to court over it, and then the court decides based on what. So you need more concrete rules. And for this, I believe the risk-based approach with tangible, clear, or at least as clear as possible criteria for high risk, low risk, medium risk. I think that is a sensible way to go forward.
question today. Wow, so maybe three more. Or yeah, this in the back. Well, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Hardt. My name is Sascha, and I would like to ask, in how should academic integrity policies evolve when AI becomes deeply embedded not only in student assignment, but also in institutional decision-making, such as grading or admissions? Is it ethical for universities to prohibit AI use for students while at the same time using AI internally for administrative costs? Thank you so much. Much longer.
Thank you very much for the question. I think the answer needs nuance because, as I said in the very beginning, artificial intelligence is not just the use of large language models, right? It's not just ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence is also things like large-scale data analysis tools, which, of course, not only universities but companies everywhere, public administrations, public registers, everybody has been using for as long as they have been around. So is it ethical to prohibit use of AI for students while using it in the own administration? It depends on what concretely it is that we use and prohibit, respectively. I think it's perfectly ethical to prohibit the use of generative AI in examinable content produced by students, while at the same time using, for example, data analysis tools in the administration of students. What is not ethical, of course not, is to prohibit the same thing from students and like the use of generative AI to produce essays and allow staff to write articles with it. No, obviously not. So this is something that should be subject to the same kind of regulation.
Thank you for the question. So we get two last seconds. Two last questions.
Thank you for the great lecture and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Sascha, and talking about the academic integrity, and there are so many students using the AI for the negative purposes, such as cheating elements. And is there any responsibility from the AI tax companies? And what kind of responsibility do the AI tax companies have to ensure the AI system used professionally for the good or bad things like committing report, such as cheating elements? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, of course, there is. I think this is also one of the very useful innovations of the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act, that the obligations are imposed on both the producers and the users of the AI products. So the companies that develop the artificial intelligence programs must perform certain tasks depending on the risk level of the tool they're using, right? So let's assume that I'm OpenAI, a producer of ChatGPT, which is typically a medium risk, low risk application. Then still I have certain obligations. I need to be transparent about what is true. I need to be transparent and also track the data that I have used to train it with. All of these things to avoid or prove the fulfillment of the accountability requirements under intellectual property, etc. Or when it is about when we use, for example, social media algorithms. I'm a big supporter of the idea of algorithmic transparency. For example, we know that social media algorithms, if they are tweaked in a certain way, can cause panics, riots, can promote extremist ideas, and so on, especially in certain kinds of jurisdictions which have high social media usage and low social media literacy. Should there be an obligation on the providers of the platforms and the user and the producers of the AI tools? Absolutely. Transparency requirements, accountability requirements. Yes. The short answer is yes.
Thank you. Very last question.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Hardt. So my question is actually been to philosophical about the artificial intelligence and education. So if AI, artificial intelligence system, begin to outperform human reasoning in doctrinal analysis and interpretation on what ethical basis legal education can still claim humans have this authority. What remains in academic integrity when human mind is no longer the most reliable interpreter of law? Thank you.
Well, first of all, this is not new, right? Human minds have for a very long time not been the most accurate. So there are these wonderful studies from the US about bail decisions. Like, in the US, when the question is whether somebody gets free on bail before a criminal trial, or whether they should remain in custody, the decision is typically taken by a single judge who will look at the person, have a conversation with the person, ask some additional information, and then take a decision. And there have been studies where they compared the decisions of judges to the decisions of computers. These were not artificial intelligence. They simply had some input, age of the person, gender of the person, income level of the person, and some other factors. And based on that, the computer would say yes or no. And it appeared that the computer was more successful in predicting recidivism or non-recidivism, and therefore taking the right bail decision. And the interesting bit is the computer was more successful by having less information, because the judge actually always said, okay, for me, this is about the human factor. I can sense whether somebody is lying to me. I can sense whether somebody is a good person or not. In fact, they couldn't. And the cold, fact-based, numbers-based decision-making of the computer was ultimately better. So was the human mind ever the best placed mind to take a legal decision? We don't know. There's also the famous study according to which criminal sentences imposed by judges get stricter, heavier, the more hungry the judge is. So the human factor is always a problem. But then conversely, if you ask most humans, would you rather like to be judged by a human judge or by an artificial intelligence judge? Most people will tell you a human judge, please. It's not only about the accuracy of the human mind or the capacity of the human mind to process whatever quantities of information. Are by default social, and of course this comes with biases, and sometimes we can have great detriment from these biases, but we can also benefit from these biases because we can create a rapport, right? We can create compassion, we can create understanding, and these are things that AIs are not very good at doing just yet, even if some people do call them science. But right, there is rapport between humans. So I don't think that AI is or should be replacing the human mind, even if the human mind is in many ways deficient. Yes, it is. It has always been. So what? Law is built by humans for humans. It is as deficient as the societies that make it.
Thank you to everyone, also Dr. Sascha for active participation and excellent question. That will be the end of our topic today, and we hope this lecture encourage all of us to uphold academic capability to use technology responsibly and to continue fostering an ethical academic environment. On behalf of the Faculty of Law, Veteran Jawa Timur, I would like to express our gratitude and sincerely hope for the continuation and the expansion of collaboration with Muslim University in the future. And we strongly believe that joint efforts in teaching research and academic will benefit our institution and our education community. Once more, a bigger applause to our guest lecturer.
Thank you very much.
This is what is this? Pantun. This is I and this is Hardt. We are here for the afternoon party. Thank you for your insight, Dr. Sascha. Now we are aware to responsibly using ChatGPT. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Vale. Tadi ya.